feel like a real film star now. Almost. Good. Well, we'll see how this works. Well, welcome to the first of 3 sessions this afternoon, or this morning, this afternoon. And this one is entitled, Becoming Nearly Zero Energy, Get Started. Sounds like a great film title, doesn't it? My name is Nigel Claridge, and I'm from Sustainable Innovation in Stockholm. But just to avoid any confusion whatsoever, I am actually from London, not Swedish, although I have managed to get stuck in Sweden for the last 40 years. Happily, I can say. The other thing I need to make very clear is that despite the fact that my surname is Claridge, I had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the hotel, sadly again. I have stayed at the hotel a couple of times. In fact, the last time I stayed there, when I checked in, the lady behind the reception desk said, "Oh, nice to have you here, sir. How do we spell your surname?" Obviously, not that good. I am responsible for Work Package 5, which I think has been quite nicely presented by Stavrola, so I'm not going to spend too much time on presenting the different hotels that are in the Work Package, which I had intended to do. But what I would like to do is to make this session quite clear. What we're going to address in this session is what I would call the non-technical issues. I think the next session is going to talk about technical issues and what falls out of the energy audits that have been discussed. But we see very clearly that the technical issues will not give us the effect we require if it isn't encompassed, if you like, by good non-technical issues. And I think the word to focus on is pragmatism, or pragmatic solutions. And here we're talking about these sort of non-technical issues. We're talking about methodology, which Stavrola alluded to in her presentation. We're talking about funding, which we mentioned earlier on. We're talking about policies, pragmatic policies, that actually help the hotel business, and in particular, the SME hotel. A lot of these policies, a lot of these funding regimes, a lot of the methodologies are good for large organizations with large renovation plans. But we're talking about smaller organizations. In our project in particular, we're looking at the small SME industry. And not all of the policies, not all of the fundings, and not all of the methodologies are good for the smaller hotels. So we need to address that in some way. So I'm hoping that our speakers today will be able to help us with that. But that is where we are looking. That is the top-down focus on what we're trying to achieve. But this doesn't work when I move away from the microphone. The picture that you have in front of you there, we've seen before. The concept of nearly zero is actually quite complicated, and when we've had these sort of presentations before, I usually ask the audience, do you know what we mean by nearly zero? Do you understand the complexity of what it actually is involved? And I can do the same now. I mean, how many of you understand really what nearly zero is all about, what we're trying to achieve? It's not just energy efficiency measures, okay? It's not just making changes in energy efficiency. It's actually creating or producing quite complex energy efficiency measures so that you're dropping your energy consumption down to challengingly low levels. And the figures will be discussed, I expect, in the next session. And then for that small amount of energy that you consume, you will supply that with renewable energy sources. So it's a combination. It's not just energy efficiency, it's energy efficiency and renewable energy sources. That combination is massively important. Otherwise, we don't achieve nearly zero energy in the pure meaning of the word. And the other thing is, which I think is massively important, because my background actually is a little more behavioural than it is energy science, energy engineering, is this with behavioural change. This is, if you like, the bottom up. Now, I've worked in the business of IT for the last 30 or 40 years, and I see exactly the same problem. People invest in IT solutions, but if it doesn't work for the end user, the entire investment is wasted. Okay? The same thing applies here. You can invest an enormous amount of money in energy efficiency and renewable energy, but if your staff, if your guests, if your management don't think don't think energy, don't think sustainability, then you're not going to achieve the full potential of your investment. You're not going to achieve the nearly zero energy goals. And that third, that blue blob there, if you like, is a bottom-up approach as well. Massively important. And that's why one of the things that Stavrola talked about a little earlier on was this training and education of staff, management, and of course the guests as well. So we want to, if you like, encourage guests not only to, when they're at the hotel, think about these things, but even actually when they go home. And if some of you have seen the video that Michaela from Vienna has produced, she's very clear on that point, and she says that a lot of her guests, when they go home, they actually carry on with the ideas and the initiatives that they're running at the hotel. So that's actually very cool. So we have 16 hotels, little echo as well.
You have to move from the back row, yeah.
Is
Now
it
it's
this one here?
working, so you just move a little bit.
This way here.
Maybe try.
Okay.
Oh, with this,
The ergonomics of Holmes.
because it has two microphones.
And we have 7 countries across Europe in different climate zones. I had a few pictures here. We don't need to spend too much time on them. But what I can say with all these hotels is that all of them have had energy audits. All of them are working on feasibility studies. Some of them have produced rollout plans and will have produced rollout plans by the end of our project. And some of them have already started and will continue to do implement some of the measures that they had specified. So we're on target. We won't get hotels that achieve nearly zero in this stage by the end of our project, but they're on the road, they're starting on the first stages of achieving that. And that for us is massively important. And that means that during the course of the project, which has been going for the last 3 years, we have a fair amount of input and knowledge and information. And we've learned a few lessons. The first lesson we've learned is the level of understanding or the level of knowledge about nearly zero energy in hotels. It's actually quite low. So we need to do more in terms of raising the awareness, raising the understanding, and also making them quite clear about what the definitions are and how they achieve it. The other thing that's become massively evident is the value and the benefit of these energy audits. They're totally central in achieving this. Without the energy audit, without the understanding an all-encompassing energy audit of your hotel, you will not be able to move off in the right direction to achieve nearly zero. So energy audits have been totally central. The other thing that's been a bit of a problem is that, okay, hotels have decided, yes, this is a really good idea, we'd like to do this, we want to move in that direction, we're motivated, but where's the technical experience? Where's the technical assistance? We find that many of the people within the country that are energy experts are not actually up and running in terms of nearly zero energy, good energy efficiency, but they haven't made that step to nearly zero. So that needs to be improved as well. The fourth issue is funding. And, you know, we hear this, I mean, when I go to Brussels and listen to some of the things that are presented there, and it's like, sounds incredibly exciting, but then you wonder, well, where's the money coming from? And without the money, without the funding, without the incentives, without the initiatives, I'm very concerned that things are not going to be moving forward quite as quickly as they should be. Stavrola mentioned 2 very important dates, 2015 and 2020. Now, 2020 is actually 4 years from now. Now, I know what's happened to our project over these last 3 years, and we've got 16 pilot hotels. We've now got to work on, how many did you say? 20,000 between now and 2020 to get them up and running. How are we going to achieve that? And I'm absolutely sure that some sort of funding sources, initiatives, and of course policy is going to be central. And the fifth one, which again I think is massively important, is this passion. For those of you, again, who've seen the Vienna film, Michaela's passion for nearly zero, passion for sustainability, shines through, as it does with Bjorn and as it does with our other pilot hotel owners here. The passion is absolutely important for it to move forward, in a positive direction. So the conclusion is, we need to have high-quality, independent energy audits leading to measurable and targeted renovation rollout plans. That is central. The challenges are going to be financial and professional expertise, and we need to get stakeholder engagement and behavioural change. Those are the Those are the three key issues, and then of course time, as I mentioned before, is of an essence. So that, if you like, introduces us to the session. I'm not going to say any more at this stage other than to introduce, I think, our first guest. And our first guest is Pablo Hernández Ubiria. I said that? Yes? Good. And you are
From
Corona del Mar.
Yeah.
Yep. Good.
Sí, está bien. Buenos días, soy Pablo Hernández de Hoteles neZEH, una cadena situada en la Comunidad Valenciana, en las localidades de Benidorm, Gandía, Peñíscola y Vinaroz, con 15 establecimientos. Para entender un poco por qué nos iniciamos
Un atelier.
en este proyecto tan interesante, neZEH, os voy a poner en situación de nuestra empresa. Es una empresa familiar en el que siempre ha tenido un fondo, ¿no?, que nos gusta llamar social, con colaboraciones con, por ejemplo, la Fundación Vicente Ferrer, entre otros proyectos, para la mejora de países subdesarrollados, así como una parte que es la política medioambiental. Pero sin ello escatimar esfuerzos en nuestro cliente interno, que es el propio trabajador, que es la base para que toda la iniciativa y todo proyecto pueda seguir hacia adelante. Con proyectos tan importantes para nosotros como el proyecto Personas o el proyecto Sonrisas, que van encaminados a eliminar barreras entre la dirección y el personal base, consiguiendo que una actitud proactiva entre ambos y entre departamentos. Este es el precursor de toda iniciativa. Comentar que nuestra andadura en la política medioambiental empezó hace ya más de una década en el Hotel neZEH Corona del Mar, situado en Benidorm, un hotel de 129 habitaciones. La directora actual es Marta Gómez, es la que está a cargo del proyecto. Tiene unas ventajas que nos ayudó a elegirlo, que tiene una estabilidad en la ocupación de más de un 90% durante todo el año, sin altibajos. Es difícil de conseguirlo, pero las tiene y ayuda mucho a la estabilidad del personal y a favorecer la implantación de diferentes proyectos. Hace 10 años, hace una década, empezamos con la implantación de la ISO 14001, así como conseguimos ser el primer hotel de la Comunidad Valenciana y de los 5 de España en tener el certificado EMAS en gestión medioambiental, en base a que nos permitió tener unos criterios y tener nociones sobre diferentes aspectos, porque nos permitía identificar y controlar aspectos ambientales que tienen nuestra actividad, así como identificar y cumplir requisitos legales de la normativa vigente y establecer unos objetivos, según los cuales no entendíamos que se pudiera mantener una política medioambiental. ¿Cómo se desarrolla esto? Vale, ya está. Este es el Hotel Corona del Mar. Aquí están las instalaciones. Es un hotel vacacional, puramente, del litoral, con su piscina climatizada y todas las instalaciones normales de un hotel de playa. Bueno, comentar que en base a esto, cuando nos comentaron de formar parte de este proyecto, neZEH, para la reducción de gases de efecto invernadero, nos pareció interesantísimo por un dato muy importante para nosotros, que era el hecho de poder valorar nuestro gasto real energético, que hasta entonces, por mucho que nosotros aplicábamos ciertas políticas, no las podíamos valorar, así como saber los gases que podíamos llegar a emitir a la atmósfera. En este sentido, se hicieron una serie de... Con este estudio nos permitió sacar unos objetivos viables, ¿no?, y de inversión que se estimaron en 575.000 euros de inversión total. Esto es un compromiso que nosotros tenemos para invertir en este hotel, solo que hay algunos que se pueden cumplir pronto, más fácilmente que otros, y los iré comentando durante la presentación. Me han dicho que tengo que ir un poquito rápido, así que lo diré rápido. Con la incorporación de este proyecto, que nos sentimos muy orgullosos, tomamos unas medidas que las voy a leer porque son numerosas, así que espero que se me entiendan. Algunas ya se tomaron con anterioridad, pero voy a leerlas todas. Recogida por gestor autorizado de RTPs, instalación de interruptores en las correas de las terrazas para el corte de aire acondicionado, instalación de un equipo de compensación de energía reactiva, sistema eléctrico de bajo consumo en todo el hotel, sanitario y equipos de aseos con reductor de consumo, cristalería de Cotrim, puerta de entrada automática en el hall para evitar las pérdidas de energía, instalación de una caldera de alto rendimiento con acumuladores aislados. Me refiero que antes la caldera era una caldera de gasoil y se sustituyó por otra de gas natural. Haciendo una lavandería de alto rendimiento, horno convección vapor con sistema de control del nitrógeno y reducción de consumo más eficiente, aislamiento térmico en las columnas de calefacción y aire acondicionado, ascensores con maniobra triples de memoria parada, grifos secamanos urinarios con sistema de detección de presencia, luces de aseos en zonas comunes con sistema de detección de presencia, adquisición de un nuevo tren de lavado, adquisición de una deshumectadora, sustitución del equipo eléctrico del descasificador, evaporador nuevo para la cámara de ensaladas. Se han retirado todos los equipos que contenían R22 y, sobre todo, lo que más importante es la concienciación que hemos tenido que llevar a cabo para el personal del hotel, para que entiendan que una bombilla encendida no es solo ahorro de energía, sino también están permitiendo que beneficie al medio ambiente. Es un proyecto interesante porque, en principio, muchos de estos contemplan un coste importante de implantación, pero tienen un retorno que no es a tan largo plazo, en torno a unos 4 años, la mayoría de estas medidas. Quiero comentar un proyecto que tuvimos en marcha para fomentar que el trabajador, nuestro cliente interno, entienda el proyecto. Fue hacer una actividad. Sacamos al personal del hotel y parte de la empresa y fuimos a plantar 500 árboles a la sierra de Aitana, una sierra cercana que se había quemado por un incendio. Esto fue una actividad muy bonita, ¿no?, y haces que se involucre todo el departamento del hotel. Comentar también que muchas de estas medidas que se han llevado a cabo en el Hotel Corona del Mar, que para nosotros ha sido el hotel donde se implantó las primeras medidas medioambientales, se han ido exportando al resto de los hoteles porque hemos visto que han sido muy positivas y no han afectado al cliente. Es muy importante. Todas estas medidas que nosotros hemos tomado no han tenido ninguna repercusión al cliente, que es el que nos da de comer. Bueno, pues más o menos es lo que quería comentar. La verdad es que ha sido un proyecto muy ilusionante. La directora y todos están muy concienciados y nos sentimos orgullosos de estar aquí con vosotros. Muchas gracias. Ha sido cortito.
Muy bien, muchas gracias. You can come here and can introduce the next panelist.
Do I have to ask a question now or later?
If you want.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. A quick question in terms of what you plan to do in the near future and what you see the big challenges are for you and your hotel, in particular in the context of this sort of non-technical side of things, but also even naturally the technical.
Okay, perfect. I need a...
Do you need a microphone? This one, you can. Oh yes, we get lots of exercise in this one.
Okay. Sí, se me olvidó comentar. Gracias por la pregunta. Nos hemos tenemos un compromiso a lo largo de este año de reducir las emisiones que tenemos en un 5%. Se han tomado medidas importantes y se van a tomar medidas en el futuro, como por ejemplo sustitución de todos los minibares por unos más eficientes, poner un sistema de osmosis en la lavandería que nos permite ahorrar un consumo de agua caliente en una cifra considerable, debido a que permite hacer el lavado a una temperatura bastante inferior. También ¿me deja los papeles? No. Hay proyectos que están valorándose por su alto coste, por su alta inversión, que son, aparte de las 100 placas solares térmicas que ya dispone el hotel, es incorporar placas fotovoltaicas y de una mini eólica, disculpar, que es muy difícil de expresar. Bueno, estas dos últimas estamos valorando la forma y presupuestos porque conllevan un coste muy importante. Comentar también que en el último mes hemos realizado la contratación de energía. La que nos viene al hotel es toda la energía renovable. ¿De acuerdo? Eso es por nuestra parte.
A chance to influence the future. You're the star here. Our next guest is President of Turismo in Portugal, João Cotrim de Figueiredo. Was that good? You know, Englishmen are hopeless when it comes to foreign languages.
Thank you, Nigel. Sustainability is about microphones working. Sustainability is about the use of resources, best use of resources, especially the scarce ones and non-renewable ones. The most scarce and non-renewable of all resources is time. So I will stick to my 5 minutes religiously. There's a reason why expressions like electric light or color TV or soon digital marketing are going to go out of fashion. It's because it's going to be taken for granted. Zero-emission hotels, I'm set to say to all of you, starting with me, we're always seen as dinosaurs that in the year 2016 we'll be discussing issues like zero-emission hotels. Soon, all hotels will be zero emissions. It will be part of the course. Our problem is, why isn't it happening faster? Smartphones took about 4 years to reach 50% penetration in the markets they were launched. 4 years. We just learned that in 3 years we got 16 hotels to be part of the chain. Why this disparity? Why are people flocking to buy smartphones and not exactly flocking to get hotels into the zero emissions program? In other words, why do people choose? Why do they choose to buy smartphones? Why don't they choose to be in this program and have zero emission hotels? Now, people and organizations, which are made of people, the same thing, move because they want to avoid pain. In other words, carrot. Now, is the size of the carrots, is the size of the sticks that we are seeing here today big enough? Are we showing people enough positive reasons, incentives to join the scheme? Or are we showing them that the disincentives of not joining are big enough? In my opinion, we are not. I take one of the examples that we just heard from Pablo. These two largest investments were photovoltaic panels and the removal of minibars. The two largest investments of all the series. Paybacks, 11 years and 33 years. It's not enough of a carrot. So unless technology moves to lower the cost of these investments, we are not going to have a flock, a rush, an acceleration of this project soon. Okay? So all that we are doing, and we're doing it correctly, needs to be incremented. We're doing correctly that we inspire people. We show them the good examples. We choose the front runners. Yes, we're doing that right. We're not using those front runners enough. We don't know about them enough. Stadthalle in Vienna is probably the exception that most people know about. But still, they have to become from front runner to poster boys. They have to inspire people. And they have to inspire people in the proper way. Not just that their conscience tells them to be a zero-emission hotel, but it makes business sense. And we have not seen enough of the argument that it makes business sense to be zero emissions because of the payback periods, because of the initial investments. Okay? So, when we talk about carrots and we talk about sticks, there are two types of each of them. Those that are material, money, in other words, money that you save, money that you earn, money that you don't spend, money. And there are non-material things, psychological stuff, your conscience, that you want to do something for the future, for the planet, that you feel the need. Okay? And in each one of these fields, we need to work much more to show these examples as examples, not just of these 16 hotels. There are many other hotels which are doing perhaps not zero emissions, but very low emission hotels, which are making more money now than they were before. Not just because they cut costs, but also because they were able to attract other segment of guests that they weren't reaching in the future. Okay? So I could spend, if I wanted to overspend my time and manage that resource poorly, I could give you examples of what we in Turismo Portugal are doing to increase the size of the carrots and sometimes the size of the sticks to make people look at this issue more closely with greater intention and begin a movement which is accelerating. But the important thing is that we all realize that what we're doing now is not enough. So some of these variables must change. Some must change at the OECD level, at the EU level, but many of them must change at national level. Starting with the finance, which Nigel already talked about, is very poor, not just in terms of availability, but also of criteria. And the last thought that I want to leave you before then we get into discussion is this. Even if there is a rush to go to the zero-emission hotels, even if we get a lot of people involved in this, there's an issue that we should not, I would never forget. Tourism is the most competitive of all global enterprises, all global sectors, if you like. There are 200 countries in the world which are active in tourism and with many different regions, and consumers can go to almost any one of those destinations every time they choose to travel. It's really competitive. So if you're doing something on the European level, for instance, we must do it without affecting the competitiveness of our enterprises, because ultimately sustainability is about our planet and the people that live in it. It would be a shame to achieve long-term sustainability at the cost of short-term economic viability. So this has to be balanced. And I think I spent my 5 minutes, right? Was I fair enough? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. So the finance seems to be very central, the business case and the funding. What sort of, in your experience, what do you think would be ideal for sort of funding regimes or funding solutions to get this started?
This is a good opportunity to test the hypothesis of what is now known as behavioral economics, that we don't do things by forcing people to go into certain types of models, but we give them signals, we nudge them, the technical term, we nudge them into a behavior that is acceptable to us. So what we do is that in all the funding sources that we manage, and we manage European funds, we manage our own credit lines, we manage Jessica Fund. In all of those funds, the criteria for extra incentive, lower interest rates or longer periods of time or more, larger percentage of participation are depending on, among others, in strong commitment to sustainable practices. So that gives people the clear sign that if they want better terms in terms of financing their refurbishment, which we value much more than new hotels, if they want to have better terms in those financing, they should take sustainability seriously and put it at the core of their project.
Thank you very much. Right, our third speaker is head of the tourism unit at the OECD and is Mr. Alain Dupeyras. the stage is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Very pleased to be there. Thank you for the invitation. So, being from the OECD, we are much more on the policy side of things, like Cotrim, but you are maybe in the middle, touching also directly with the operators. So I think certainly a main objective for the OECD in recent years has been to, I would say, to mainstream or to put at the center of policy the issue of sustainability and innovation, but also to boost some new economic approaches in the area of all policies, you know. And there is a broad recognition that we cannot continue to operate as we have been operating for many years, and that in terms of policy, in terms of business development, we need to change the model, you know. So at least we need to make this model evolving. I think we already discussed that tourism as a very cross-cutting sector, very horizontal sector, has the ability, you know, to shift, you know, towards a cleaner, more sustainable, low-carbon economic growth. This is very clear. So there is a need overall to stimulate innovation and sustainable practices in tourism. And I would like to start by saying that innovation in tourism has not been a matter of routine for tourism businesses. And this has to do with the fact that our industry is heavily dominated by macro businesses. This has to do also with the fact that tourism has been growing steadily over years, and that there was not necessarily this feeling that we need to innovate to prepare the future, you know. So overall, I mean, I think we can say that there is no strong culture of innovation in tourism. Government action is essential to shape this green innovation environment. And I think we have to say this from the beginning. What we observe is that there is no single recipe, that there are diverse policy approaches, and I'm sure we will have some chances to discuss later today, that can be implemented. So there is no single recipe. But effective governance is definitely something which is very important, which is at the core of the process, I would say. And then we have a number of principles that can be pushed to support innovation environment, green innovation environment. And this has to do, for example, just to name one, about empowering people to innovate, you know. And this, for example, is what happened with such project as the neZEH project. Government action is also very important to bring closer different policies. And here we are in between different policies. You know, we are discussing tourism, energy, SME policy, finance, environment, and so on. And so how can we make all of these policies more coherent among themselves, so more efficient? And we as governments, we all have this challenge in front of us. And especially working in tourism, this is a big challenge. And OECD is working a lot with its members on this issue of developing a whole of government approach to tourism. And in an area like this one, this is critical, I would say, to succeed in the long term. And government action is also very important to support, you know, all the tourism service providers, and in particular, all the small entrepreneurs and the SMEs. We know everything about increased global competition, difficult competition, and the fact that new business models are essential. We discussed this morning the important objective, which is to bring costs down, which is about profitability. You mentioned it. And this is very important because this, I guess, at the end of the day, will be the main driver for all businesses to be more sustainable, to be more energy efficient. So we have to work with this and to develop this new business model that will contribute to bring costs down. We should not forget about a number of other benefits that can be associated with this, like job creation and societal impacts. This can happen even if we may not expect too much, but this can be a reality, but also improve quality of life. I mean, many of you mentioned that improving the overall environment, the way we use resources in the end will be beneficial for all of us. So just to mention, I mean, we have been doing some work, and this is available on the website, on green innovation in tourism services. And in doing this, we have been working with Nordic Innovation, which is part of Nordic Innovation Council. And interestingly, we have been working with 30 companies in 10 to 11 countries on how can we support green innovation in tourism. And what is evidence is that many companies are not aware, of specific policies and programs. So this is about creating awareness on this. There is companies express a need for government to incentivize green innovation in tourism. And I think this is what President of Turismo of Portugal was mentioning also, that we need to be clearer in our incentives to companies to support green innovation in tourism and energy efficiency. There is a big opportunity for us to promote existing programs in the community, in the tourism industry, because there is a lot existing around the table, but we have to push for more. And of course, 16 hotels is very good, but we know there are several thousands of hotels, where we can push this project forward. So there is an opportunity for governments to help companies to strengthen the green innovation ecosystem at whole level, and business competency, capacity building, we mentioned this morning, this is very key, and this is an area where the governments can help. And when I'm saying governments, I'm not only thinking about national level of governments, but also about regional governments, but also about city governments. Every time we move with this, we should never forget the customer and the value of a customer focus in all of this action. And this is important, and this has to do with behavioral change. So we have to keep this at the center, the customer value and where we put the customer in this system. And in the end, this will not be a one receipt for all, but we have to consider tailor-made programs which will differ from one country to another, from one region to another, because culture is different. Type of hotel may be different. I guess the type of hotel in Palma de Mallorca is probably quite different from hotel in a city like Lisbon or Paris. So we have to take all of this also into consideration. So we are working on all of these issues. We are trying to push the sharing of practices among OECD members on these issues. We are not going at such a technical level, of course, but we are at a more macro level. But this is also very important to think about this. And of course, the funding issue is very important, and we have to work all of us together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I was going to ask you a quick question about what the challenges were to build these conducive policies and what the current approaches are, but it becomes very evident to me that one of the main issues is time. I mean, we have certain goals by certain dates, and it seems to me that there's an awful lot to do. You mentioned a large number of different units, a number of different policy groups. How do you equate that with the timescales that we're talking about, and what will the challenges be for that?
I think the challenge is, first we have to improve the overall business environment for innovation in tourism, and I see this project as part of this agenda. We have to develop a broad-based innovation strategy as part of tourism policy. So tourism policy is not only about, promotion or different things, but we also have to put all of these issues at the very center of tourism policies. We can also, act through, for example, hotel classification. And there are a number of countries now which are moving with putting sustainability elements or green innovation elements or different things, within hotel classification element, either at the core of a classification or as supplementary element. This is pushing not only 16 hotels, but all the community, of a very large community in moving forwards. And definitely we have to work on the financial incentives, and we have to be clearer. We have to be long-term thinking, because if we send clear signal to the market, then we will be in a position to succeed in the long term.
Well, it's going to be very interesting, and I'm also very keen to bring it down to the level that is interesting in our project, which is the small and medium-sized hotels as well. And that leads us nicely into the next speaker, or I guess speaker, José María Martín Rigueiro, from... Yeah.
Buenos días a todos, muchas gracias. Empezaré por agradecer a la Organización Mundial de Turismo y TH el que hayan pensado en Banco Sabadell pues como una entidad de referencia dentro del sector turístico, de la actividad turística. Y como me pedía Claudia, voy a intentar en 5 minutos hacer una explicación muy práctica de qué es lo que hace Banco Sabadell, cómo tenemos estructurada nuestra división hotelera. Hablaremos de producto. Entendemos que para cada proyecto, a mí me gusta ser de los que hablan al final, porque al final todo esto de lo que se está hablando hay que financiarlo. Y hay que buscar una fórmula financiera que se adapte a las necesidades y que dé solución a una necesidad muy concreta, que son la que tienen ustedes en cada uno de sus establecimientos para hacer frente a estos proyectos de sostenibilidad, de eficiencia energética, y por supuesto también a todas aquellas empresas de ingeniería, de eficiencia energética, empresas proveedoras. Tenemos producto también para que ustedes puedan financiar a sus clientes finales. Bueno, pues empiezo, esto me lo voy a saltar. Yo creo que Banco Sabadell, yo creo que todos conocemos el banco. En estos momentos es el quinto, uy, esto va demasiado rápido. El quinto grupo nacional, con 6 millones de clientes, una experiencia de 135 años. Yo creo que es importante, al final, esto es como un poco un matrimonio, son relaciones a largo plazo, la relación que se establece entre el cliente hotelero y su partner financiero. Como comentaba Nigel Claridge, hoy pondré un caso que no sea el Claridge de Madrid de 500 habitaciones. Pondré un caso de un hotel de 50 habitaciones y cómo se puede lograr a través de una financiación muy específica ahorros de costes que bueno, pues la cuota está incluida en este orden. Esto sí que me lo voy a pasar. Esta es nuestra presencia internacional. Yo creo que cuando hablamos de negocio hotelero tenemos que pensar también en la pata de expansión que casi todos los grupos hoteleros están desarrollando fuera de España. Bueno, pues en este sentido tenemos presencia en prácticamente todo el mundo, donde podemos dar un servicio muy específico. Banco Sabadell es un banco especializado en empresas, y como tal, bueno, pues tiene producto y servicio para cada uno de los clientes en sus proyectos de desarrollo internacional. Tenemos acuerdos de colaboración, porque aquí se está hablando de financiación. Bueno, pues una cosa es la estructura de financiación y otra cosa serán las líneas de financiación. Banco Sabadell es líder en financiación vía ICO, vía BEI. Tenemos acuerdos de colaboración firmadas con cámaras de comercio, con sociedades de garantía recíproca y con asociaciones, confederaciones y federaciones de actividad hotelera, como es el caso de ITH, con el que firmamos un acuerdo de colaboración dentro del programa Hotel Sostenible, una línea de financiación de 200 millones de euros, que hoy hablamos con la responsable de ITH, que tendríamos que renovar, porque en este plazo prácticamente hemos multiplicado por 4 la financiación invertida en hoteles. Como comentaba, hablaremos de producto muy rápidamente y de servicio. Banco Sabadell cuenta con una división específica, que es esta división de la que estamos hablando, negocio turístico, que da un servicio especializado a través de unos delegados de negocio turístico que están implantados en territoriales. Bueno, pues al final lo que se trata es de hablar el mismo idioma que ustedes. Nosotros lo decimos continuamente, nosotros somos más hoteleros que bancarios. Estamos estudiando una media de 175 proyectos continuamente, o sea, esa es la media de operaciones que tenemos en curso. Muchos de ustedes dirán, bueno, es que a un banco le presentas una operación ahora en enero y te responde en mayo. Nosotros tenemos un compromiso de respuesta en 7 días. En 7 días firmamos un acuerdo, un compromiso, el que llamamos compromiso Banco Sabadell Empresas, por el cual, con toda la documentación en nuestro poder, contestamos en un plazo de 7 días. La media son 3,5 días, o sea que realmente existe este compromiso de respuesta. Hablando de producto y hablando de eficiencia energética, las posibilidades de financiación son múltiples, pero si tenemos que destacar uno, seguramente será el renting hotelero, el que mejor se adapte a las necesidades y un poco a la singularidad de cada uno de estos proyectos. Yo creo que, bueno, pues al final, cuando hablamos de renting, todos tenemos en mente pues lo que se puede hacer en todo lo que es vehículos, equipamientos, incluso bienes de equipo. Bueno, pues Banco Sabadell tiene también una división especializada en administración pública, que bueno, pues trabaja estos productos, franquicias, financiamos, al final yo creo que este año se ha llegado a 420 operaciones, tanto de Burger King, McDonald's, Mango, y por supuesto sector agroalimentario y turístico. Renting del sector turístico, o sea, ¿qué se puede financiar a través de esta fórmula? Bueno, pues todo lo que se está comentando aquí. Cualquier proyecto de eficiencia energética que incluya calderas, que incluya climatización, placas fotovoltaicas, geotermia, iluminación, canalizaciones, envolventes. Todo esto más aproximadamente un 10% de la obra civil que conlleve este proyecto. Si hablásemos de renovación, de cambio de imagen, de compra y venta de establecimientos, quizás estuviésemos hablando de un leasing inmobiliario, pero hoy por hoy, y hablando de proyectos de eficiencia energética, el renting aporta la mejor solución, no solo la solución una solución financiero-fiscal, sino también de adaptación de, sobre todo, lo que es la vida útil del bien que se va a renovar. Todos conocemos operaciones de renovación integral de hoteles que se hacen con un préstamo hipotecario, nosotros también los hemos hecho. Y transcurridos 7 años hay que cambiar calderas, o hay que cambiar quemadores, o hay que cambiar alguna placa fotovoltaica, y estamos financiándolo 2 veces. Estamos financiando todavía la primera operación, y tenemos que incurrir en una segunda renovación. Para ello, el renting cuenta con una fórmula que se adapta perfectamente a la vida útil del bien de equipo, que conlleva, bueno, pues por supuesto el alquiler de material. El renting no es otra cosa que un alquiler financiero. El seguro, además, que nosotros nos preocupamos de que el seguro esté perfectamente cubierto, porque al final el bien de equipo que se alquila es propiedad del banco, es un activo del banco y tiene que estar perfectamente asegurado. Gestión de proveedores, y esto afecta mucho a todo lo que es administración de cada una de las actividades empresariales, cada uno de nuestros clientes, porque al final el banco es el que se encarga de la gestión de todas las facturas. Pensemos en una renovación integral de un hotel, pueden ser 200 proveedores, 1.500 facturas, todo ello se encarga el banco. La asistencia, por supuesto, todo el tema de asistencia, garantías, extensiones de garantías. La asignación por centro de coste. Hay clientes que nos piden el que cada una de estas facturas sean asignadas en un centro de coste, incluso una habitación. Al final tenemos líneas de financiación que lo que nos permiten es, bueno, pues ir incorporando bienes de equipo, cada uno con su plazo. Pensemos en cubiertas fotovoltaicas que se financian a 12 años, calderas a 10, wifi a 3, televisiones a 4 años. Cada uno llevará su plazo de amortización dentro de una línea de financiación. Siento ir tan rápido, pero no puedo detenerme mucho más. Ventajas para el cliente, por supuesto, es el pago de cuota de renting con los ahorros que se obtienen. No se financia el IVA. El IVA comprensivo de la cuota es deducible. Algo muy importante es que al final no es financiación, no figura lo que es en la CIRB, en la información de riesgos del Banco de España del cliente. Esto es importante. Comprende el 100% de la inversión, mantenimiento, seguro, la posibilidad de renovarlo o no, la posibilidad de establecer un valor residual. Ejemplo muy sencillo, hotel que financia 200 televisiones, 100 de ellas se las quiere quedar y 100 las quiere devolver. Las 100 se las quiere quedar para cambiarlas, para ponerlas en hoteles de menor categoría. Pasado el plazo, las televisiones que se van a quedar dentro del activo del cliente, del balance del cliente, tendrán un valor residual 0, una cuota más alta, y las que vaya a devolver tendrán un valor residual mucho más alto con la cuota correspondiente. Tengo tres ejemplos, voy a hablar de uno. Este es un hotel pequeño en Valladolid. Se sustituye una caldera de gasóleo por otra de gas natural. El coste en combustible son 67.000 euros y el coste de la factura energética se reduce a 40.000 con la inversión que se hace con el cambio de calderas. Las cuotas de renting son de 1.419 euros al mes. Es un renting llave en mano, es una operación que nos presenta el cliente, nosotros la financiamos y al final, ¿cuál es el objetivo del banco? El que el nuevo consumo más la cuota esté por debajo de la cuota inicial. En el gráfico se puede ver, bueno, pues esta es una operación a 7 años, las casillas verdes son la cuota anual a partir del año 7, el ahorro es total. Y bueno, pues este es otro parecido. Esta es una operación de cambio de iluminación que son muy habituales. El que, bueno, pues el importe de la inversión son 10.000 euros. Esto es un hotel pequeño. Este es un hotel en el que se sustituyen los elementos, las zonas comunes, la iluminación de las zonas comunes. Y es una operación sencilla de las que vemos todos los días. Importe de la inversión 10.000 euros, ahorro por consumo 2.800 euros al año, mantenimiento 2.000, las cuotas de renting 230. Pues aquí también se puede ver como, bueno, pues en 5 años, bueno, la cuota y el ahorro está por encima de, o sea, la cuota final está por debajo, y a partir del año sexto estaríamos hablando solamente de consumo. Entonces, bueno, pues yo creo que de forma muy rápida esto es un poco lo que hacemos dentro de nuestra división. Este diagrama que vemos aquí es complicado verlo, pero al final es muy sencillo. Nosotros, además de dar servicio o hacer una oferta de producto y servicio a clientes, trabajamos también con, como decía al principio, empresas de ingeniería, empresas de mantenimiento que quieran financiación para sus clientes finales. Bueno, pues esto es un poco el circuito, nos presentan la operación, nosotros financiamos, no somos técnicos, tenemos un partner tecnológico que es CSI, es el que valida el proyecto, y una vez validado nosotros ofrecemos financiación para este cliente final. Y yo, Claudia, no sé si he ido suficientemente rápido, pero bueno, por nuestra parte, cualquier duda, cualquier información adicional que tengan, nos tienen a su disposición. Hoy me acompaña Pedro Pérez de Sevilla, que es el delegado de negocio turístico en Madrid, y estaremos aquí con ustedes. Así que nada, muchísimas gracias.
Yep.
Oh, great. I was just about to say our final speaker isn't here, but I'm completely wrong. I had one quick question whilst setting things up, and that is whether we think the funding regimes are adapted to the small, medium-sized industry, or whether they can in some way be improved or made more attractive to that group.
I think better.
Yeah. Maybe you could come here then.
No sé si se me oye. ¿Se oye? Se oye ahora. Bueno, vamos a ver, yo lo he comentado en la presentación un poco por encima. Pensemos que el 85% de la planta hotelera son pymes, pequeñas y medianas empresas. Bueno, pues desde luego el modelo de financiación está adaptado para cualquier cliente potencial, en este caso dentro de la actividad turística, que podría ser, bueno, pues desde la gran cadena hotelera, un hotel independiente, un balneario, un camping, apartamentos turísticos. En definitiva, se adaptaría a cualquier tipo de cliente o cliente potencial. Pero entiendo que más importante que esta atención es el producto. Yo creo que más que adaptar nuestro producto, la necesidad del cliente al producto, el objetivo es dar un producto específico. Yo creo que bueno, pues aquí están representados un número importante de toda tipología de empresarios hoteleros, y cada uno tiene una necesidad. Entonces, bueno, yo insisto en la necesidad de adaptar nuestro producto a bueno, pues cada uno de los proyectos que nos presenta el cliente.
Good. Right, thank you very much. I think this is going to be very interesting. When we were in Montenegro for a few months ago, we became very apparent that the funding regimes that were discussed at ESCO level, at structural funding level, were just really looking for projects that were much, much larger than the ones that we're talking about for this target group that within the neZEH project. And that would lead nicely on to Vlaho Kojakovic. Thank you. Yes, I've been there. Who's a senior banker at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Please.
If I may, before we continue, we are losing one of panelists because of other commitments. He had Mr. João Cotrim from Turismo Portugal has to leave now, but we will continue with the four of you. Okay, thank you.
So, please.
Thank you. No, thank you. My name is Vlaho. I'm coming from European Bank, the bank which was set up 25 years ago to help transition in Eastern Europe, and over the last 3 years we started working in North Africa as well. The bank has moved towards the green economy in the last 10 years. So 9 billion investments which are happening on a yearly basis, almost 60% or more than 5.5 billion are going towards the green economy, meaning resource efficiency, energy efficiency. Built environment or building environment, including tourism, is one of the prime sectors where energy and resource efficiency can be felt and can be changed. What was mentioned here previously by the speakers, there is a prisoner's dilemma. There is always a stick and carrot, and sometimes banks or commercial banks are not really driven by the carrot which is presented through energy and resource efficiency. However, international financial institutions usually have two heads, and one head is the economic and social development, which actually translates in built environment very much into resource efficiency. The second important point that was also mentioned here was that small hotels and existing hotels are extremely difficult, and owners are extremely difficult to be motivated to move towards the energy improvements. It's much easier in commercial real estate, where you actually have the tenants in office building or in a shopping center that will be motivated by paying lower rent, by paying lower common area charges in order to be tenanted in a energy efficient office or energy efficient commercial center. That is not the case with the hotel. What we have here is an example of what we're trying to focus on, because we believe with hotels, what it works is actually energy efficiency and resource efficiency embedded in the planning of the large investments. Planning of the master developments or planning of the big regeneration projects. This project is based outside Europe. It's based in Aqaba Bay in Jordan. The project is a mega project which is actually driven by emotions as well as commercial money. And you will see that it's a prime example of how mega projects could actually be almost nearly zero neutral. We signed this project 1 month ago. We are financing 100 million out of almost $1 billion in the project. The isla is based, as I said, in Aqaba. It has a number of developments around it. And this is where EBRD was playing a role between the private developers and Aqaba Special Authority in order to create horizontal developments which would include all energy efficient and resource efficient elements that would allow developers to move forward within the master plans that are defined by sustainability as a course. Isla itself was a mining field between Israel and Jordan, when 10,000 mines after the Israeli-Arab war from the 1967, which had been cleared by the developer, and out of 27 meters access to the sea, the lagunas have been developed, which are now 17 kilometers lagunas with reintroduced marine life. So the planning that has been happening there for the last 15 years have resulted in probably the most efficient and advanced project that we saw in all our countries of operation. You can see this is the aerial picture, and this is the vision that started in 2009, where this was, as I said, a field full of mines, slowly being taken to the point that it's actually becoming lagunas, around which there are a number of developments. I'm not going to go into numbers, but we are talking about 4,000 beds altogether, split between hotels, residential developments, golf courses, apartments, and so on. Nice pictures for you to look at, but what is important actually is to come to the level of sustainability where this resort is fully supplied by the energy produced on the site, and this energy has been developed through putting PV systems around the golf course, putting PV systems around the site, and as such, actually, the whole replenishment of the lagunas is happening through the solar pumping. The water recycling, which is used for the golf courses, is a green and gray water recycling, so the actual usage from the grid is almost zero. The project has planning completion in 2017-18, and these are one of 3 large projects which actually are going to create Aqaba as a new, almost carbon neutral destination in the North Africa region. The first visitors you can see in the lagunas there are 200 species which have been reintroduced, and they are actually permanently in the lagunas, and also there are wild birds. I'm going to finish there because I know that we are running out of time, so I was asked to have a very short presentation, but I'm open to questions in regards to experience both in Eastern Europe, in North Africa, and how EBRD can move forward in making tourism more sustainable. Thank you.
Do you have a microphone? I think in the interest of time, perhaps we won't have a special question for you, because we'd like to get complete for lunch by 15:15. There are a number of questions that I had wanted to discuss, but we're not going to have time. I've got a list of about 10 here, just in case. But I think the first thing that's interesting to discuss is probably the issue of how policymakers, we have policymakers here, and financial institutions can be mobilized to offer tailor-made support for our target audience, for the SME industry, because there does seem to me to be a need for that. And it would be interesting to get it from the three perspectives. So how can this be done from the policymaker's perspective, the financial, but then we have also our colleague from Corona del Mar, from the hotel perspective as well. Don't know who would like to start on that one.
OECD report. Yeah, no, does it work?
Are we? Do we work?
Yeah, I think the message we have today is that we cannot say, I mean, things are happening, you know, and a number of countries are definitely moving ahead with some active policies on these issues. But clearly what we are saying today is that this is not enough. We should do more, maybe we should do better, and so on. But if we look, for example, at what has been happening recently within the OECD countries, you know, so we have a number of countries which have put clearer targets as part of their tourism strategies in terms of energy efficiency or resource efficiency, in terms of environmental performance, and it goes from Austria, Mexico, Norway, so we have a large number of countries active there. A number of countries have created advisory group for discussing together with the private sector and together with the financing sector to discuss technical solutions and incentives which are needed to promote these issues. So there are a number of networks which are existing in OECD countries to support this. Other policy approaches include a number of awards which are supporting innovation. And we have this, for example, in Switzerland, in Austria, and this could be very specific, not only to innovation in tourism, but to environmental innovation in tourism. A number of countries have been trying, but I think here we are less successful maybe to develop some, to improve the access to finance to SMEs. This is already a very difficult issue in itself, I would say at a generic level. So when we think about tourism and the fact that we are largely dominated by micro businesses, you know, it's even more complicated, but I'm sure my colleague from EBRD will have a few words on this. These are issues we are working on recently, and a large number of actions have been taken to enhance the capacity of stakeholders, not only of private businesses, but also of regions, of cities. Awareness of these issues in order to explain better the various tools which are available for them to act. So I say that nothing has happened, but there are plenty of initiatives, but they are probably too small in themselves, and we have to put them at a different level, I would say.
Turismo, áreas especiales seguridad, eficiencia energética, etc. Un poco la labor, en este caso, nuestra, el incremento del asesoramiento. Utilizamos estas líneas de información y nuestro consiste en identificar cuál es la forma que mejor se adapte y tratar de realizarla.
Bueno, yo quería comentar una cosa respecto a la empresa privada, en donde siempre encontramos mayor dificultad es parte de que cuando se escribe la normativa no siempre es tan fácil como aplicar. Nos comentaba que la parte más difícil siempre es establecer medidas con el trabajador que puedan ser encima con la normativa vigente, la normativa necesaria para ser aplicada, ya que no siempre es del todo realista o es consciente de lo que exige nuestra actividad, ¿no? Y respecto a la financiación, siempre está bien, ¿no?, los bancos, pero apoyo institucional en cuanto a subvenciones sería... Hay subvenciones, pero sería necesario que fueran más importantes.
Well, in our experience, I think there are two levels. One level is if you have very strong government and legislation which is forward-looking, and that legislation forces, so it's a stick level, forces hotels and operators to implement certain measures. However, as the economy moves up and down and it's a volatile sector, we know Africa today, although it's major FDI in Egypt and Jordan, the tourism is down 50, 60, in Tunisia 70%. So the government is going to be reluctant to implement the energy efficiency and resource efficiency measures. The second level is probably the banks. If the banks at the design stage in their financing building of the hotels condition their money with certain measures to be included in the design, this is probably something which then translates into implementation and operational level. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for the hotel owners to take additional debt on the basis of their incomes because they had created a certain level of debt when they were actually purchasing or building these hotels. In our experience in a number of countries where we work, Croatia, Montenegro, Slovenia, actually we always say that it's the third hand that starts making money on a hotel. First is the guy, and usually it's a guy in his 60s, 70s, who plunges an amount of money thinking that he's building himself a monument. Actually, he's building a gravestone. So in 5 years' time, the bank that is financing eats the equity, the hotel is gone to the bank's hand. So the bank thinks that they can manage the hotel. After 3 years, they understand they can't. And then on the auction, when the hotel is sold, it finally starts to repay its debt. And if you start talking to the owners in the first 5 years, 10 years of operation, even later, they simply cannot, they don't have capacity to take additional debt to do refurbishment, especially for hotels, to do refurbishment, to do energy efficiency, and obviously with the energy prices going up and down, there is no clarity that this is going to pay off at any time soon. So in a way, I think going back, it's always the design or the legislation that would make the most impact.
That's very interesting. I think we're running slightly out of time here, but I think one final question, I think would be very interesting from the project perspective, and that is what, in your opinion, are the critical non-technical barriers that need to be addressed in order to unblock, if you like, large-scale renovation in our economy? Based on what we've discussed and presented today, how would you prioritize it? What are the critical factors, and what do you think is the most important to or through to address?
Las principales, lo que más nos puede pasar, por ejemplo, a nosotros es la captación de las placas fotovoltaicas, ¿no? Y las mini eólicas. que permiten conseguir bajar el consumo de gases de efecto invernadero, pero la inversión es muy alta y en parte también lo que necesitas son instalaciones para poder acometer la instalación de esos equipamientos. Actualmente tenemos la suerte de que, por lo menos nosotros, en nuestras zonas por fin ha llegado el gas natural, que antes no, y nos obligaba a tener equipos de almacenaje de gas, cosa que podemos retirar y sustituirlo por placas fotovoltaicas, pero si no es el caso no hubiéramos podido ni pensar en la instalación. No sé si exactamente era una de las cuestiones o me he ido un poco para las demás, pero...
Good afternoon. I'm going to be very short. My name is Christian de Varham, Chief Executive of the Umbrella Association for Hotels and Restaurants in Europe. Just a very, very small comment, because I think we heard a lot of good things, and of course sustainability and innovation are essential for the future of the industry and tourism industry. But it is clear that, as was said by Alain and by the other colleagues, 75% of the hotels are micro-enterprises, less than employees. So it is clear that the funding, the incentive in order for those micro-enterprises, family-run hotels to invest, have to be and supported by an incentive. For the rest, of course, it's a question of behavior, it's a question of growth, as it has been seen today, of the benefits of engaging and connecting to building an energy hotel. But for sure, I just wanted to say that as we see the question of the energy, which was mentioned, and it's a real point, because of course then there is a return on investment which could increase. So incentives, groups of benefits, and behavioral commitment to sustainability should be part of the answer. Thank you.
Lógicamente también analizamos lo que es vital, es un proyecto, un plan de negocio consistente. El asesoramiento es fundamental, no el nuestro a la hora de, lo entendemos a la hora de estructurar y de valorar el proyecto, pero el asesoramiento es fundamental. En muchos casos estamos recibiendo proyectos que no son ni sostenibles ni viables que se puedan incorporar dentro de un seguro. En muchos casos son pequeños hoteles, apartamentos turísticos, autónomos. Entonces, Nigel preguntaba por la barrera técnica. Para nosotros esto es una barrera técnica, el poder contar con un proyecto, un plan.
Pablo and Alain, João and João. I won't say very much more other than I think that probably the time to make the change a little bit from perception that we're becoming more zero and we've just started now. That seems to me to be massively important because timescale gives me 4 years to 2020 things that are our way. 4 years actually is not very long. And get started now. Thank you very much for this. Thank you very much.
That concludes our morning session. We will join again in the afternoon at 15:30 in the same room. So if you'd like to join us again. Please, we'll see you again at 15:30. Thank you.